This is the 20th World AIDS Day, and as we celebrate the progress that's been made and yet how much more we've got to go forward in the battle against AIDS, we wanted to do a particular emphasis on President Bush and the PEPFAR initiative and all that's been done in the last 5 years. Now, I want to introduce the benefactors who've helped make this possible, all behind the scenes. And so I'm going to ask them to all stand up right now just as we get started. And if you'll hold your applause till they've all stood. On the back of your program, you can see who they are. Triumvirate Peace Fund, if you guys would stand. The Peace Coalition, Opportunities International, the One Campaign, Saddleback HIV/AIDS Church Initiative and Saddleback Church, Highlands Fellowship, National Community Church, African Health and Hospital Foundation, and Reader's Digest. These are the people who made this possible. Would you give them a warm round of applause? Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Then we couldn't have done this at all without help from Museum. And isn't this a beautiful place? I mean, it is really. I hope you'll go walk around. I got to be here on the grand opening, and I thought, if ever we want to do a program in New York City, or Washington, D.C., we want to do it here. And I called my friend Charles Overby, the director of Museum. He's here. Would you give a warm welcome to Charles Overby? Thank you, Charles.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the museum, Rick.
We're glad to be back.
I want to tell you all a story. Shelby and Mary Lee Coffey and I were with Rick Warren at the opening, and we said, Rick, we hope you'll come back. And he said, well, I think I'd like to. And so 7 months later, he calls and says, I want to take you up on your invitation, and I want to bring a friend or two with me. And you have done that very well. We're privileged to host Rick Warren here. He's always welcome at the museum, and we just appreciate what he stands for, what he does, and we're just glad that you are here. This is still a new operation. Many of you have been to the museum. Many of you have been upstairs to special events, but haven't actually been to the museum. We want you to come back on a normal day and enjoy all of the 14 galleries and 15 theaters. Now, this is a first for us today. In 7 months, we have never closed this 4D theater for a private event.
Wow.
This is a little bit like Disney World closing the Space Mountain ride. This is the tour de force of the museum, but we felt it was worth it. And we just want to say welcome to everybody. Please come back often. And Rick, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much. Well, what is the Saddleback Civil Forum? Well, I got an idea a long time ago that said, you know what? It seems like civilization is losing its civility. We've got to figure out a way how to talk about issues without demeaning and demoralizing and demonizing each other. And so I began a series of events out at Saddleback Church on our 120-acre campus in Southern California, where we began to invite people in to discuss different issues, some of them controversial, some of them not, but people from all different backgrounds and different walks of life, and to deal with these issues so that we can, when we do disagree, we disagree disagreeably. That when we work on issues, you can walk arm in arm without seeing eye to eye on every issue, and you don't have to agree with everything. In fact, I can't get my family to agree with everything I believe in, and so why would I expect everybody else? But we do need to restore civility to the civil discourse. And so over time, in different months, we've done different civil forums. One of them we did, for instance, we brought in 5 Holocaust survivors from World War II, Jewish Holocaust survivors, and had them share their stories in a Christian church. And we all, thousands of us, sat there and wept together and talked about how we cannot allow that kind of thing to happen ever again, and the importance of eliminating genocide. Some of you may have seen when I invited now President-elect Obama and John McCain to come, and I interviewed each of them for an hour. And as we're coming up on World AIDS Day, we have done in the past always a 3-day conference at Saddleback Church called the Global Summit on HIV, AIDS, and the Church. and we bring in the top experts and leaders from all around the world for a 3-day conference. We've done it every year at our church. This year we decided, on World AIDS Day, let's go to Washington, D.C., and before President Bush leaves office, we want to honor him. No man, in fact, no world leader has done more for global health than President George Bush. I can say that without fear of being contradicted. I have been in the countries all around the world where people will say, I am alive because of the PEPFAR program. My husband is alive. My children are alive. My wife is alive. Literally millions of lives have been saved in the last 5 years. And it's the most underrated and misunderstood program, I think, of this administration. And so I contacted the president, and I asked if he would come and spend an hour with Mrs. Bush and with my wife, Kay, and let us talk about what's happened with the PEPFAR program. President Barack Obama, President-elect Obama, has already said that he is fully behind PEPFAR and is going to promote it even in his administration. One of the things you're going to be hearing today are some video testimonies of world leaders, and we're going to be playing those for you. You'll hear about them in a little bit. But first, I want you to learn a little bit, maybe you don't know that much, about PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It was first announced in the State of the Union address in January of 2003, 5 years ago, and then it was signed into law, and then in July it was recently reauthorized again. And before we go any further, I want you to watch a little bit a video on the history of the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Watch this.
When I took office, an HIV diagnosis was usually a death sentence. Parents watched their babies die needlessly because local clinics lacked effective treatments. This modern-day plague robbed countries of the hope of progress. Governments, the private sector, and faith and community-based organizations responded vigorously to this crisis. This is really a story of the human spirit, one of the great untold stories of our time.
It would be the most ambitious health initiative ever launched. A program of unprecedented size. A worldwide alliance of public, private, community, and faith-based groups. Bringing together a vast public health infrastructure across 5 continents to forge the most integrated, most comprehensive program ever brought to bear on one disease.
One of our main goals from day one is to prevent HIV.
PEPFAR supports organizations working to change behavior that leads to infection. An engaged public is the key to stopping the spread of HIV. Raising awareness is the first step. PEPFAR supports bold programs aiming to change minds. High above a market in Tanzania, President Jakaya Kikwete urges his fellow citizens to be tested for HIV. In the midst of a busy day, a private security company partnering with PEPFAR teaches employees how their choices can determine the spread of HIV. The alliance of government and private organizations will make sure the one overriding message gets through. Knowledge is the first step in protection. In the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro, another community leader fighting HIV/AIDS starts her day.
My name is Beha, and I'm 23 years old. I found out I was HIV positive 2 years ago because I was so sick. If it is not these ARVs, I think I was dead long time ago because I used this and I'm still using these drugs. Now I can do anything. I'm healthy and I'm strong. I volunteered at Mawens since 2007.
Recently a patient herself, Betha returns daily to give back to other patients struggling with the disease. These are the unforeseen leaders in the fight, a gift to the world and to the crisis. A rising force transformed into healers of themselves and of others who are struggling with HIV/AIDS.
For me, I'm a life example. I thank for this organization, PEPFAR.
This is the impact that has made our emergency plan and the modern-day Good Samaritans who are implementing it so effective. It's important that we continue the work we have begun.
This is the first time ever there was such a huge commitment to fight one single disease. And now I'm very happy to thank the American people and show them that if you stick together to a plan, you can really do miracles.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burden be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Thanks, Charles. Good morning. I'm Gerald Sharon. As part of the Saddleback Church team, I have the privilege of serving as the North American Director of Purpose Driven. In honor of today's event, Pastor Rick invited several of his friends to send words of greeting and commendations to President Bush for what he's accomplished around the world in the area of healthcare. And we have several of those videos that we're going to be watching together in just a moment. Unfortunately, we had some problems on our end with the greeting from President Clinton. So I want to begin by reading you what President Clinton had to say. I want to congratulate President Bush on receiving the International Medal of Peace and to thank Reverend Rick Warren for giving it to him at the Saddleback Civil Forum for the President's commitment to dramatically increasing America's contribution to the global fight against AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. I think as time passes, people will look back on this as one of your most remarkable contributions, Mr. President. Because of the work my foundation does around the world with AIDS, I see your PEPFAR people everywhere. I see the lives that are saved because of the medicine dealing with AIDS and malaria, and because of the work your people are doing with people in countries with whom you partner. It has made a breathtaking difference. There are so many people alive today because you cared about this. You convinced Congress to care about it, and you convinced people of faith to help you sell its importance to Congress and the country on the imperative of spending a small amount of Americans' tax dollars to do a huge amount of good around the world, to make friends and to make peace. There will be fewer conflicts, fewer deaths, and less violence, and more hope, because all of these people have a chance to live healthy lives. Thank you for doing it, and again, congratulations on an award that is well-deserved. And now, would you watch these videos from friends and world leaders that you'll recognize?
Pastor Warren, President Bush, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to send greetings to this forum. AIDS continues to be one of the most devastating epidemics in history. The disease is still one of the top 10 causes of death worldwide and is the #1 killer in Africa. Yet there has also been remarkable progress. Fewer people are being infected, fewer people are dying. We are making inroads against the stigma and discrimination. We have to maintain this momentum. We must protect people from the impact of the global financial crisis. Cutbacks in treatment and research would have devastating consequences. The need to lead on AIDS is as real and urgent as ever. I congratulate President Bush on his legacy of leadership in this fight. The President's emergency plan for AIDS relief has made it possible for people in countries hardest hit by the disease to receive treatment. The United States is now the largest contributor to the global response and will spend $48 billion over the next 5 years, not only on AIDS, but also malaria and tuberculosis. We are not powerless in the face of disease. I pledge to do my utmost in this struggle, and I will count on you to join me. Your engagement and support can mean the difference between life and death for millions of people around the world. Thank you.
Good afternoon from Geneva. My name is Michel Kazachkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. I would like to congratulate President Bush for winning the International Medal for Peace for his efforts in global health. The Global Fund is one of the instruments President Bush and the U.S. Congress, through their generous funding, have used in this effort, and as a result, millions of lives have been saved. I look forward to work with President Bush and with President-elect Obama in the future to continue the great progress we have seen from our joint efforts over the past years. Let me also warmly thank Rick Warren for his tireless work for good and to commend the Global Peace Plan's efforts to engage all sectors of society in the fight against disease worldwide. Thank you.
Mr. President, Bill and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the leadership in the fight against AIDS, malaria, and other diseases affecting the world's poorest people. All Americans should take great pride in the President's Malaria Initiative and PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. These investments are achieving real results, and they're bringing hope and opportunity to millions of people around the world. Bill and I have seen this life-saving impact firsthand. I'll never forget visiting a vibrant PEPFAR clinic in Durban, South Africa. The well-trained staff, the life-saving AIDS medicines, the lab equipment, even the building itself had all been made possible by the generosity of the American people.
Mr. President, as Melinda said, PEPFAR and the President's Malaria Initiative are both terrific success stories, and we hope they'll continue to flourish in the coming years. Of course, we're facing difficult economic times, and the next administration and Congress will have to make some very tough spending choices. But investments in proven global health initiatives are among the wisest our country can make. Having made so much progress in recent years, this is no time to turn back. Mr. President, thank you for being a champion for global health and for creating a legacy of hope that will last for many years to come.
Hello, everyone. It's a real privilege for me to play a small part in what is a big day. World AIDS Day continues to demonstrate our global determination to defeat HIV/AIDS. It's a show of worldwide unity against a disease which makes no distinction between age, gender, sexuality, color, race, or creed. And it shows our international solidarity with those living with HIV/AIDS. It's a sure sign of our belief that in time we can and we will defeat HIV/AIDS, as we have done with other major diseases which once ravaged the world. And on this World AIDS Day, it's a particular pleasure for me to be able to add my congratulations to my friend President Bush on the award of the International Medal of Peace for his work to promote global health. Through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, the Malaria Initiative, and the global funds provided by his administration, African countries in particular have been able to increase their health assets and take a major step forward in delivery of health services. President Bush's efforts have saved literally millions of lives. But many of those who benefited will never be able to say thank you face to face. So it is on their behalf today that we say, for your leadership, your determination, your insight, and your investment, thank you, Mr. President. I also want to send my good wishes to Rick Warren and his peace plan on this important occasion. You know, it's often difficult for governments to reach the most distant, rural, illiterate, and poorest people, providing them with health and education. People have to be able to recognize early onset of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, or malaria, and then take themselves or their child to the clinic and take them there in good time. Otherwise, all the aid in the world is to no avail. So faith communities have a unique role in helping to reach them, which is why this is such a powerful partnership. Rick Warren's work in Rwanda is a fine example of how people of faith not only provide moral leadership, but practical and desperately needed assistance for the poor, and to make sure that the sick get the care they need. President Bush has shown what can be achieved when America provides global leadership in humanitarian assistance in the places where the world needs it most. In a couple of months, when the torch is passed to a new generation, I'm confident that the leadership that President Bush has shown will be an inspiration for the new leadership that President-elect Obama will bring to the fight against HIV/AIDS. So on this World AIDS Day, we remember those who've suffered from the effects of this terrible disease. We honor those like President Bush who've done so much to tackle it around the world. And we anticipate the determination that a new administration can also bring to this vital cause. To President Bush, to Rick Warren, to everyone there today with you, thank you and well done.
Hello, my name is Bono. I'm your friendly neighborhood rock star around the Capitol. This is a recording studio. This is where I work. This is the reason I'm not with you today. I would dearly love to be with you today, the 20th anniversary of the first official World AIDS Day. I really feel a little bit left out not being there, because it's a big day in the life of an activist, because we're stopping today to mark a moment, and that moment is what's been achieved in the fight against this tiny little virus that's caused so much damage, HIV/AIDS. I want to thank President Bush for his leadership. He is a hero. You are a hero, sir, in the fight against this deadly disease. I'd like to toast your missus, the First Lady, Laura. I'd like to toast Rick Warren for his leadership. So many of you in the room I've kind of gotten to know over the years, and I'm in awe of what you've all accomplished. 3 million people on antiretroviral drugs. That's 3 million people who owe their lives to the United States of America. I think there's nearly 2 million of them are Africans, paid for by PEPFAR, the President's own program. It's a lousy name, by the way, PEPFAR. I'm a songwriter, you can take it from me. Although I am in a band called U2, which is an acronym as well. But it's an extraordinary thing you've all achieved. When I think of mother-to-child transmission, which is one of the most just upsetting of all, to think that you've interrupted that transmission. I think it's nearly 12 million times. So much more to do, I know, but it's a day to stop and give thanks. God bless America.
I pray you'll be our eyes and watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe.
La luce che tu dai,
we'll find your light.
Nel cuore resterò a ricordarci che l'eterna stella sei nella mia preghiera. Quanta fede che us to a place.
Guide us with your grace.
Give us faith so we'll be saved. Sogniamo un mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia, di speranza. Ognuno io mono vicino, simbolo di pace, di fraternità. La forza che ci dai è un desiderio che ognuno trovi amore intorno dentro a sé. Let this be our prayer.
Let this be our prayer.
Just like every child.
Just like every child
needs to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be saved. Elevating che hai acceso in noi. Sento che ci
One of the hallmarks of the PEPFAR program is that it developed new partnerships that had never been done before, including partnerships with faith-based organizations, which had not been done to the degree that was done in this, because there are some problems that are so big, you have to team tackle them. Last January, I was speaking in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and I kept hearing people talking about we need to have public and private partnerships. We need to have public and private partnerships working together. And when I heard that, I said, well, you're right, but it's close but no cigar. You're missing the third leg of a stool. A one-legged stool will fall over. A two-legged stool will fall over. It takes three legs for a stool to stand. And for there to be stability, you have to have at least three different partners. There is the public sector, which is government and non-government nonprofits. There is the profit sector, which is businesses and corporations. And there is the faith sector. And what's often been left out is that faith sector. Now, let me put this in perspective. There are 600 million Buddhists in the world. There are 800 million Hindus in the world. There are 1 billion Muslims in the world. And there are 2.3 billion Christians in the world. The actual number of secularists in the world is really quite small outside of Europe and Manhattan. Most of the world has some kind of faith. And if you say people of faith cannot be involved in humanitarian efforts, you've just ruled out most of the world. Because most of the world has some kind of faith. And so there has to be a way where each of these groups can bring things to the table that the others don't have. Now, each group brings issues. For instance, government brings issues to the table of protecting the people, setting agendas, determining national priorities. There are a lot of things that government do that is a legitimate role of government. Businesses bring to the table things that government doesn't have. Businesses bring often expertise in technology. They bring capital. They bring investments. And they also bring management skills, because most businesses, most churches, and most governments are poorly managed. But churches and houses of worship, whether they are synagogues or temples or any other congregation of faith, bring a number of things to the table that government and business will never have. For instance, let me just put this in perspective. With 2.3 billion people in the world who claim to be a member of some church, that makes the church the largest organization in the world. It's bigger than all the Walmarts and McDonald's and Starbucks put together. I could take you to 10 million villages in the world. The only thing in it is a church. They don't have a school. They don't have a clinic. They don't have a post office. They certainly don't have any government. The only social structure in much of the world is the church. The church was global 200 years before anybody started talking about globalization. It speaks more languages than the United Nations. It's in more countries than the United Nations. And in far more, thousands more people groups. And when you take all of the different places that you can find a mosque or a temple or a synagogue or a church, you have pretty much covered the world. They have universal distribution. They have the most volunteers, manpower. Hundreds of millions of people volunteer through their church every week in communities. Larger compassion army than any government will ever have. They have local credibility, because when you go into that village, they trust that priest, that imam, that rabbi, that pastor, far more than they trust anybody in the government. And there are a number of different things that they have to offer. A year ago in December, President Bush asked me to be the closing speaker for his global summit on malaria. And I was trying to make this point that if we're going to team tackle some of these big issues, like extreme poverty, pandemic diseases, illiteracy, corruption, injustice, trafficking, and all these different things, we're going to have to team tackle them. People of goodwill, of all different faiths, but people of goodwill or people of no faith have to work together. And I said, let me just give you an example of why we will never be able to eradicate AIDS, malaria, or anything else without involving churches, specifically local communities. And I said, I'm just going to show you 3 slides. I'd like to show you these slides right now. The first slide is a slide of Western Rwanda. This is the little country of Rwanda is a very small country, about 9 million people, and it's divided into 5 provinces: north, south, east, west, and a central province, kind of like Washington, D.C. This is the western province of Rwanda. There are about 700,000 people live in this community. It's a very mountainous area. A lot of people, you just walk, you don't drive anywhere. Now, let me show you the next slide. These 3 slides, first, go back to that one, sorry. The 3 H's on that slide were the 3 hospitals that they have in Rwanda, in the western province of Rwanda. 3 hospitals for 700,000 people. Now, that means it's a 2 days walk to the nearest health care. 2 days walk. So if you get sick and you need to go to the hospital, you're going to walk 2 days to get to the nearest hospital. By the way, 2 of those hospitals are faith-based hospitals. So you wouldn't have 2/3 of the health care if it weren't for churches. Then this next slide, that's the 3 hospitals. Here's the next slide. Here are the area health centers, and there are 22 clinics in the western province. Now, that's better than 3 hospitals, but it's still 1 day's walk to any of these clinics. And if you get sick and you got to go to a clinic, it's at least a day's walk to one of the 22 clinics for 700,000 or so people. Now, if you've been anywhere in developing countries, you know that a clinic often means a bottle of aspirin sitting on the shelf. That's all there is to it. I've been in clinics where they had a microscope, an old microscope, and nothing else, no medicine. And so it's not the kind of clinic that we talk about today. So 3 hospitals, 2 of them are faith-based. By the way, these 22 clinics, 20 of them are faith-based. So you wouldn't even have most of the clinics in much of the developing world if it weren't for churches and faith-based organizations. I said, now let me just show you one other slide. Here's the 3rd one. Now here are the 742 churches in the western province of Rwanda. Now, if you are sick and you need to get health care, let's say you have AIDS and you need to go get your ARVs, where would you be most likely to want to go get them? 2 days walk, 1 day's walk, or 5 minutes walk? Melinda Gates was sitting on the front row. She's a friend of mine. She stood up, came up to me afterwards. She said, Rick, I get it. The church is the distribution center for health. I said, yeah, but not only that. For education and a number of other things, too. They're already on the ground. More boots on the ground. And that's what it's all about. Now, the next series of videos that we're going to watch are a series of videos about Africa. And the first video is a video tribute to President Bush from President Paul Kagame, the president of this country, of Rwanda. And he represents all of the African presidents. We asked the African presidents to send a endorsement or a thank you to President Bush and to America. And so I want you to watch these videos on PEPFAR in Africa.
On this World AIDS Day, I would like to honor President George Bush, who has, through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, made a remarkable contribution to combating this disease globally. In my country, Rwanda, PEPFAR has made a tremendous difference. For example, more than 50,000 persons living with HIV and AIDS have access to antiretroviral drugs and treatment. For the first time in the history of our country, we are making significant progress towards defeating malaria with the contribution of President Bush's malaria initiative. Mr. President, your dedication to global health has been key to our success, and we thank you very much. You have set very high standards that we hope others shall follow. We wish you the best in your future endeavors and hope to see you again soon in Rwanda.
A new deadly virus surfaced in 1981. Since then, 25 million people have died, and no single region on the earth has been spared. In the U.S., over 1 million people are infected, and more than 25% don't even know it. The disease continues to ravage Africa and is expected to do the same in India, Russia, and China. Last year alone, 3 million people vanished from the face of the planet. And this year, HIV/AIDS will kill even more. All around the world, over 40 million people are infected. 5 million people are infected every year. 14,000 people will become infected today. There is no cure for this deadly virus. It destroys our communities. It destroys our families. Leaving 15 million orphans to fend for themselves. Children who are without hope. This is the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world. Today, 8,000 people will die. Are you okay with this?
talks about hunting. So please join us and let us go hunting!
Jesu utailome alasela ganjani yesikali sigamoya ngoba satani weza uJesu utailome. Jesu,
America is the most blessed nation on earth. Our freedom, our resources, our prosperity, and our opportunities are blessings we must never take for granted. Every day in America should be Thanksgiving Day. Because we are so blessed, it is easy to forget that most of the world lives far differently. Billions fight a daily battle against 5 intimidating global Goliaths, the 5 giant worldwide problems of extreme poverty, pandemic diseases, deficient education, conflict and injustice, and spiritual emptiness. Millions go to sleep every night with hungry bellies, without access to the health care and medicines we take for granted as Americans. Most of the world is not thinking about the economy or elections or entertainment. They're unable to think beyond their next meal, their next hour, or even their next breath. Global killers like HIV/AIDS, malaria, and TB stalk the streets of their poor villages or their overcrowded, filthy urban slum, decimating families and destroying futures. The poor have no escape. There must be some response. To whom much is given, much is required. We are blessed to be a blessing. We cannot sit on the sidelines, ignoring our brothers and sisters' battle for survival. We cannot close our eyes or ignore their cries for help. Together, people of faith must create partnerships with other people of goodwill to team tackle these 5 global giants. The battle is so enormous, we'll only win by mobilizing the talent, energy, and resources of all Americans in all 3 sectors of our civil society. The public sector of government and non-government nonprofits, the profit sector of businesses and corporations, and the faith sector of local faith congregations, which are filled with volunteers. Like a stool, it takes 3 legs to stand. 2 legs are not enough. Each partner must do its part. Each has an indispensable role to play. This is the genius of the Peace Plan, a global initiative engaging all 3 sectors of society to promote reconciliation wherever there is conflict, equip ethical leaders wherever there is injustice and corruption, assist the poor wherever there is poverty, care for the sick wherever there is disease, and educate the next generation wherever there is illiteracy and ignorance. This is not the moment to do nothing. At this second, billions of good people are fighting in a life or death struggle, and they are losing. 30,000 children die daily from preventable diseases. AIDS alone takes the lives of over 8,000 children, women, and men every day. We cannot look the other way. We must not divert our attention. We must not let go of their hands. We must not let them fall off the cliff. The 5 global giants of extreme poverty, pandemic diseases, deficient education, injustice and conflict, and spiritual emptiness do not attack nations. They attack real people with faces and real families just like yours. So the battle must be met face to face. One village, one congregation, one family, one person at a time. If it was you fighting the battle, wouldn't you want help? Will you do your part? Will you play your role? Will you join us? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the United States, George W. Bush, and First Lady, Laura Bush, and Saddleback Civil Forum hosts, Rick and Kay Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Okay.
All right, let's sit down. All right. Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, I want to start by admitting to the audience that you always call me Ricky.
Yeah, you always call me Georgie.
There are only 3 people in my life who call me Ricky: my mother, my grandmother, and the president. So now we've got 3 purposes here this day. First, thanks for being here. On the 20th anniversary of World AIDS Day, we want to do a little information, we want to do a little celebration, and we want to do a little explanation. First, I want to get a progress report on PEPFAR and an update on what's actually happened. Then I want us to talk about why you did it. Mm-hmm. Why did you do it? And I want to talk about some of the stories you've heard, some of the things you've seen around the world in the last 5 years. And then we want to honor you for your efforts, because we think that this is one of the most amazing things. I mentioned earlier in our pre-show that no man in history, no world leader, has ever done more for global health than President George W. Bush. And I think we need to recognize that. And I thank you for that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about the results of PEPFAR in 5 areas: saving lives, creating new partnerships. Yeah, you don't have to write them down. Trust in local leadership, encouraging behavior, and reducing stigma. Now, first, these are 5 things that, as I've watched this program develop from the ground, that are very unique, very unusual. For instance, insisting on accountability. When you established this, and you first announced it at the State of the Union, 2003, you insisted on measurable goals. Most development's afraid to do that. Yeah. They're scared to death to do that. But you did it. So how are we doing? Tell me about what's happened in the last 5 years.
Well, Ricky, we're doing pretty good. I insisted upon measurable goals because I felt that lives needed to be saved. Yeah. And if you don't have measurable goals, lives might not be saved. We live in a process world in government. Oftentimes people said, well, what are the inputs? This is an administration that tried to get people to ask the question, are we actually doing something? And so we set a goal of saving 50,000. Well, when we got started, there were 50,000 people getting antiretrovirals in all sub-Saharan Africa. Mm-hmm. And we set a goal of 2 million people by 5 years to get antiretrovirals.
From 50,000 to 2 million.
In 5 years. And, thank you for setting this up, because today we were able to announce that we're over 2 million in less than 5 years, which is fantastic.
That is fantastic.
You see, but setting goals is difficult for some. Bureaucracies tend to avoid goal setting, and all due respect to bureaucracies. Foreign governments tended to want to avoid results. Nobody really wants to be held to account, oftentimes. And so setting the goals also had to change the way we did development aid. In other words, we said to people, we want to help you. But rather than being paternalistic about our help, which basically says we know better than you on how to achieve our goals, we expect you to be a partner in achieving the goals, which was an attitudinal change, basically saying to African leaders in this case, we trust you. Yeah. We think you've got the capacity to be a good partner. And
okay, now you mentioned 2 of those things. Well, I'm going to read your quote. You once said this: Africa's most valuable resource is not its oil or its diamonds, but it's the talent and the creativity of his people. Now, a lot of politicians say that, but you insisted that the people who were going to do PEPFAR, that the decisions and the strategy actually be done by the people on the ground there, instead of bureaucracy or centralized back here. And so this principle of trusting the local leaders is a pretty innovative thing when you think about it.
Well, actually, it's a timeless management principle of aligning authority and responsibility. If you disassociate authority and responsibility, you can't have accountability.
Yeah.
And so we aligned responsibility and authority. And
that didn't make some people happy. I mean, what about the people who
that's what happens
say,
sometimes in my line of work. You know?
Okay, now you mentioned this because this is another innovation, the innovation of trusting leaders at the local level.
Right.
Instead of saying, we over here are going to tell you what to do. You let them determine the strategy in each country. And that's how you got to $2 million.
Right. Well, we actually help them develop the strategy. But when they develop the strategy, therefore it's easier to hold the strategy developer to account.
Yeah.
And so it's not all that profound to basically say, you know, responsibility and authority go hand in hand.
Yeah.
What was different is that the United States believes that paternalism is destructive. And we believe partnership is constructive. And that's the basis of a lot of our foreign policy. For example, not to get off subject, but the Millennium Challenge account basically said, we want to help you, but we expect you to do some fundamentals, such as govern justly, to end corruption, to invest in the health and education of your people, to believe in market-oriented principles for the economy. What's earth-shaking about that is it basically says, we believe you can do better. We believe in setting high standards and helping you achieve high standards. That's different from, we're just going to give you money to make ourselves feel better. And that the results don't end up accomplishing our objectives.
You know, that makes me think of the old Reagan statement, trust but verify. Because you did both. You trusted the local leaders, but you also made accountability. Now, let's talk about this partnership for a minute, because you brought in a whole new group of partners in PEPFAR. PEPFAR was not just a model for AIDS, but it's a model for all kinds of programs, because you invited everybody to the table, including faith-based.
Especially faith-based. I say especially faith-based, not including faith-based, because I believe that when people join organizations to love their neighbor, that is a powerful not only recruiting tool, but it's a powerful incentive for effectiveness on the ground.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about our experience, I say our Lars here, as you know, and we've traveled to Africa a couple of times, and we've seen people from the faith community in Africa sharing their stories about what it's like to love a neighbor.
Yeah.
And so
I've heard you say many times, government can't love.
That's right. Government's justice and law. Love comes from a higher government.
Yeah.
And or a higher calling, or from God. And
now,
and so the whole purpose of including the faith organizations was, frankly, bring some order into that which was already happening.
Yeah.
Your church, other churches, synagogues, people from around America who are motivated by faith are involved in the process. So why not bring some order and focus? And that's a proper role of the government in this case. And it's working. It's paying off. The interesting thing about people who are volunteering in Africa to save lives is they're actually saving their own life in many ways. They may not be saving it, but they're certainly strengthening it.
Let me talk to you about your own personal motivation behind this. This was the largest initiative ever committed to a single disease, PEPFAR.
Yeah.
And I mean, when people heard it, I know when I heard it in 2003, I thought, will that ever get voted through? Because it was just such an enormous, what they call a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And from a purely political viewpoint, you aren't going to get a whole lot of votes from that.
Yeah.
So what was it that motivated you to do PEPFAR?
Well, first of all, I believe in this admonition, this principle, to whom much is given, much is required.
That's what I believe.
Secondly, I would hope that when it's all said and done, people say, this is a guy who showed up to solve problems. And when you have somebody say there's a pandemic that you can help and you do nothing about it, then you have, frankly, disgraced the office.
And finally, I was surrounded by people who were pushing hard on this initiative, people I trusted. Condi Rice, Mike Gerson. When I first was talking to Condi about becoming the National Security Advisor, she said, I want you to make this promise to me that you will focus on Africa.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And then there's Gerson, who was very much involved with our policy on these issues, and I spent a lot of time with him. See, he was the speechwriter.
Yeah.
And so the speechwriter got to spend a lot of time with the speech maker.
Plant a few seeds of thought.
And it's harder to take words out of a speech than put them in at times. And so, no, anyway, my only point is I had a group of people around me, people whose I trust and people whose hearts I came to admire, that helped forge the policy as well. So, you said you're going to give awards and all that. I don't deserve an award. The people that helped make this policy work deserve the award. And then once we got going, Mark Dieball, who's our ambassador on AIDS, I think you call him coordinator for AIDS, it's one of his titles. But anyway, I like to be able to deal with Mark because I can say, Mark, what are we doing? Are we making progress? And the answer is yes. But if the answer was no, I would say, why not, Mark? And my only point there is that we've got a bunch of dedicated folks, once the initiative got going, who are follow-through people. And anyway, it's been a fabulous experience working with them all.
So it's been worth the scars.
Yeah, look, I mean, absolutely. I don't feel like I have scars.
Tell me about some personal experience that you've seen as you've traveled around the results, because there are all these numbers, 2 million people, 2 million lives that have been saved that wouldn't be on ARVs, wouldn't be getting any help. Can you tell me about one of them?
Yes. So in Uganda, we first went to Uganda. I was checking out the ABC program, abstinence, be faithful, condoms, the kind of the comprehensive approach to prevention in the first place. And I met a guy named Mohammed in a clinic there, and he just looked terrible. It turns out one of his dreams was to come to the United States. He got on antiretrovirals and was present in the East Room, where you were, by the way, when we signed the reauthorization bill of PEPFAR. Now, it is in a moving experience to see a person go from near death to realizing the dream of being in the White House. That's why they call the effect that's taking place in Africa the Lazarus effect.
Yeah.
People given up for dead now realizing there is life.
Yeah.
And with Laura and I met a lot of people. What the American people have got to understand about this initiative is it's in our national interest that we help save lives in Africa.
It's good foreign policy.
Well, it's really good foreign policy. It's good national security policy, too, because the truth of the matter is we are involved in an ideological conflict against people who can only recruit when they find hopelessness. And there's nothing more hopeless than to be an orphan, for example, whose parents died of HIV/AIDS, wondering whether or not there's a future for them.
Yeah.
And so it's in our national security interest to deal with hopelessness where we can find it. It's obviously in our economic interest to have a vibrant, growing, group of consumers. But it's in our moral interest. It's in our moral interest. We're a better nation when we save lives. And I wish the American people could see, what we have seen after this PEPFAR initiative has kicked in and brought results. I mean, people literally lining the roads in Tanzania, all waving.
Yeah.
And anxious to express their love and appreciation to the American president who represents the American people. And it's good to see them all waving with all 5 fingers, I might add.
Well, Kay and I have been in most of those PEPFAR countries, and it is true. You know what? I've discovered that when you help somebody get better who's been sick, they tend to like your country.
Yeah, they do, and which is good. Look, I think it's important. I mean, everybody wants to be liked. But being liked because you've actually done something constructive that's measurable is the best way to try to be liked. And it's very important for America to be humble in our aid in this sense. In other words, we can't say, okay, we're spending so much money, we demand this.
Yeah.
Or we're going to make you do this.
Yeah.
And that'll end up making us not liked. But to be partners with people and to, herald good government and to focus on the individual will make us liked.
I want to read you a quote. In a recent article I read, Mike Gerson wrote about you, referring to the malaria initiative. And he said, in the crucial policy meeting about malaria, one person supported it, the President of the United States, shutting off debate with moral certitude that others have criticized. And I saw how this moral framework led him to an immediate identification with a dying African child, a Chinese dissident, the Sudanese former slave, the Burmese woman's advocate. It's one reason why I'll never be cynical about government or even President Bush. Is that an accurate description?
Yes. He was sitting in the meeting. Far be it from me to contradict him. After all, he now has the power to write another column. Anyway.
Okay, well, let me read you another.
I believe this, and I have said this throughout my presidency. First of all, a president must have a firm set of principles from which he will not deviate. And I believe in the universality of freedom. And I believe freedom is universal because of an almighty God. And I believe that it's not just freedom from tyranny that the United States must become involved in. I believe it's freedom from disease, freedom from hunger, freedom from deprivation. And so if you believe in the universality of freedom, then one should not shy away from doing your duty. Can I share a story with you?
Go right ahead.
So I've had a lot of amazing moments as president. One such moment came in a town square in Bucharest, Romania. I was coming to be the welcome people into NATO. An attack on one is an attack on all, which is something the Romanians wanted to hear from the U.S. president. In other words, their security was guaranteed. It was a rainy day. There was a lit balcony. And I asked, why is that balcony lit? And it was because the tyrant Ceausescu had given his last speech in this balcony. Just as I stepped up to speak, a full rainbow appears. It was a stunning moment. Remember, it was a drizzly day, kind of dark. And I ad-libbed, God is smiling on Bucharest because the rainbow ended exactly behind the balcony where the tyrant had given his last speech.
Yeah.
Now, you can look at that any way you want to look at it. One way to look at it is, hey, pal, you got a lot of influence. And you use your influence for human liberty, for decency, and for justice all times, all places. And so the PEPFAR initiative, or what Mike described in that article, has been a part of the freedom initiative, the freedom agenda. And the real challenge for the world is whether or not people have a view that freedom is universal or whether it just happens to be available for certain people. And it's kind of a moral relativist debate. I believe in the universality of freedom and have not deviated from that during my presidency.
Now, I've read many, many stories where PEPFAR gave people hope.
Yeah.
It's all about hope.
Yes, it is.
Do you feel pretty hopeful that we can win this fight against AIDS?
Sure. I believe we can win a fight against anything when we get our mindset to it. At home, we've spent about $99 billion since I've been president. $20 billion on top of that for research. You know, I've gotten to know Anthony Fauci and some of the people at the NIH who are working day and night to try to figure out a way to, to provide some kind of relief from this pandemic or this terrible disease. Yeah, we can. Sure, absolutely. And a lot of it has to do with people's individual, being responsible for their behavior.
All right, let's talk about that for a minute. AIDS is primarily a behavior-based disease. I mean, you don't get it from water. You don't get it from the air.
Right.
You can't eat something and get it. And you supported, and PEPFAR supports, behavior-based training as part of a total package, like ABC.
Yeah.
And all that. And yet there's some people who oppose, they don't think the government should be trying to encourage healthy behavior. What do you say to those people?
They must not be results-oriented people. If you want to achieve results, if you actually want to solve the problem, then put strategies in place that work. And look, I mean, abstinence is a loaded word here in Washington, D.C. It's become politicized. My answer to that is a part of a comprehensive strategy. And by the way, abstinence works every time.
All right, let me read you this quote out of the New York Times. I read this last January. There's an article titled, "In the Global Battle on AIDS, Bush Creates a Legacy." And here's the quote. "Even critics concede that Mr. Bush spawned a philosophical revolution. In one striking step, he put to rest the notion that because patients were poor or uneducated, they did not deserve or could not be taught to use medicine that could mean the difference between life and death."
Well, if you believe that we're all God's children and believe there is God-given talent for every single person, then one should not be surprised by a policy that elevates the individual, that focuses on the individual, that doesn't focus on bureaucracies, but tries to get help into the hands of individual people. And it's really the heart of a lot of our policies out of the administration, whether it be PEPFAR, whether it be the faith-based initiative. I mean, for example, some people need help from something other than a psychologist when it comes to drugs or drinking. And therefore, rather than force people into situations where it won't be effective, why not give them a script that they could redeem at a place that may be a faith-based institution where they call upon a higher being to help them
for their recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. And my only point is, it's the empowerment of the individual that also yields the results that we initially talked about, and it's very important for America not to become, have such a kind of elitist view about himself or a snobbery where we don't trust the individual.
Yeah.
And
Mr. President, my wife's had a profound effect on me, and I know that's true with you.
That would be true.
And the First Lady has been involved in this battle all along. Kay and I have been with her on trips in Africa and seen that. I want the people to see a little bit of a video of Mrs. Bush speaking in Rwanda in one of her trips dealing with people. Let's just watch this for a second.
As a global ambassador for the president, First Lady Laura Bush has made 3 independent trips to Africa, visiting 10 nations. On all 3 trips, Mrs. Bush highlighted the partnership between the United States and Africa to expand education, empower women, and fight against diseases such as HIV/AIDS and malaria.
Through President Bush's emergency plan for AIDS relief, the American people are partnering with organizations and governments around the world. Rick and Kay Warren are 2 of the many U.S. citizens who work with Africans to provide treatment and services to men and women living with HIV/AIDS and to children orphaned by AIDS.
During her trip last summer, Mrs. Bush visited 3 programs supported by the President's Africa Education Initiative, as well as programs receiving assistance from PEPFAR and PMI.
Every person has value, and every person deserves the opportunity to contribute to their own society.
Wherever she has gone, Mrs. Bush has reaffirmed the administration's steadfast commitment to justice for women.
Now, this is a country of growing opportunity with confidence in the future. The people of the United States share your confidence in Africa's future.
Well, would you welcome the First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Laura Bush, along with my wife, Kay Warren. Well, thank you for joining us, Mrs. Bush.
Thanks, Rick.
And it's been great to see you in action. And actually, Barbara's here today.
That's right.
Where is she? There she is. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
We're glad you're with us.
Katie?
Oh, well, Mrs. Bush, I have to start by saying thank you. This is my first opportunity to thank you for your graciousness to me. One of the first times that we met in Rwanda, our paths crossed, and we happened to be in the same hotel, walked up the stairs together, and it's my moment. I'm meeting my first lady, Mrs. Laura Bush. I'm in awe. I'm enamored, and I tripped. We're walking upstairs. I tripped. I fell. I smacked into the stairs. I dropped my purse. You came back. You picked up my purse. You handed it to me. You
she
helped
flashed
me
the
up
Secret Service.
Yeah, oh, gosh. It was so embarrassing. And so I just imagine that, if somebody says to you, do you know Kay Warren? You go, oh, yeah, I think she's that lady that's just, fell all over the place in Rwanda. But you've forgotten it, but I have not. And this is my moment to thank you for being so gracious. You rescued my purse and my dignity and all of that. But thank you very much. But seriously, I love that we share a passion for people with HIV and for vulnerable children. But I'd just love to know, when did this grab your heart? When did this first start for you?
Well, I guess really on those trips to Africa, the first ones, I remember very well when we were together in Rwanda. And
I made an impression.
Well, the people we met made the big
That's
impression,
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of those days. Jenna was with us, and we were in a church service, and this I think is really part of what you all are working on, and this was an attempt to get pastors or religious leaders across Africa to be tested and to admit if they were HIV positive, to show their parishioners that anyone could have AIDS, and certainly encourage their parishioners to be tested. And I'll never forget the pastor that spoke and how sweet that was. And Jenna and I had these precious children who were in the audience with us. They were mainly AIDS orphans who came over to sit on our lap. And
sitting in your lap.
Very, very sweet moment. But I was very impressed by the idea of working with the clergy. This is another faith-based part, but this is a part where pastors can really pastor the people in their churches, because they can admit themselves that they're HIV
that particular church that we were all in together was a small church of 300 people caring for 900 people with AIDS.
It's amazing.
That's how many they were caring for in the community, that one church.
And we did meet one 12-year-old who was raising her little brothers. It's just something that we don't think about here in the U.S., but that is these very young children themselves who are raising the little children.
Excuse me, baby.
Go ahead.
Call her baby. Anyway.
At least it's not Ricky.
That's okay. I'm Katie. Katie, Ricky, Georgie, Lori. So.
One of the results that I did not talk about was that 10 million people have been affected. 10 million people with HIV have been affected by the program. So over 2 for antiretrovirals, but 10 million have been affected. 4 million of those are orphans.
Wow.
And so my only point is that there's a lot of people whose lives are being touched by the program.
I remember that particular church, and I remember glancing up at just one point and seeing you and Jenna at that exact moment when some little girls in little torn dresses climbed up in your laps. And, on one level as a mom, I was looking at that thinking, oh, how cool that is to be traveling with your daughter and experiencing all that you were experiencing together at that moment. And at the same time, I was just, as an American citizen, I was really humbled and touched to know that, because I know how much you and the President care about people with HIV, and you were demonstrating it actively, and it was very meaningful. But you weren't just in Rwanda. You've traveled, as the video said, all across Africa. So and you've seen some things that most people would never see. So what are some of the other things that you've seen and learned in those
Well,
trips?
I've seen so many really terrific things. A lot of great programs started by Americans. One is the Mothers to Mothers program that Dr. Mitch Besher in California and Robin Smiley started, and that's a program where mothers who are HIV positive who deliver babies who are HIV free because they go on antiretrovirals while they're pregnant, and then they mentor newly pregnant women to make sure those women are tested so they can deliver babies who are HIV-free. One of the things they do is they encourage these new mothers or newly pregnant women to admit to their families that they are HIV positive, and it's a way to fight the stigma. And one story I heard was one expecting mother went to her family and called all of her brothers and sisters and her mother together to tell them. And when she admitted that she was HIV positive, so did all her brothers and sisters.
Wow.
But there, I read today an article in the newspaper, a sort of discouraging article about a lot of people are concerned that we're spending so much money on HIV, only one disease, and ignoring other diseases. But what in fact happens is the money that goes to PEPFAR or PMI ends up setting up a health infrastructure for many of these countries so that every disease is treated, not just HIV.
That's a big point.
It is. And this ribbon that I'm wearing that's made out of beads was made by one of these mothers in the Mothers to Mothers program. So it ends up that there's microfinance. These mothers end up with jobs. They end up being able to make things that can be sold. They deliver HIV-free babies. A lot of them are then employed to be the mentors of the next group of mothers. So there's a really very far-reaching effect from one program that is supported in part by PEPFAR, but the money ends up really having a great cascading effect on the lives of all these mothers, and not just. Today in the article they mentioned pneumonia, a leading cause of death among babies in Africa. But these babies are also getting health care.
It's all tied in together. I want to go back, Mr. President, to one of the things that Mrs. Bush said about there's a whole group of people who say, well, should we be spending this money on development? Particularly say, the economy's bad right now. No. Should we be spending on? How do you justify spending that with the principle of to whom much is given, much is required, as a foundation of your...
Because we're a rich nation, and we can do both. And the worst thing would be for our government to make promises to people in the continent of Africa that we're here to help you and to be partners with you, and then all of a sudden turn our back on them. I couldn't think of anything.
And let them die.
Well, that too. But that would be terrible. It's interesting you were asking about, stories. Remember we went to the school in Rwanda? So these were children whose parents had died because of AIDS. And I just happened to walk by and said, God is good. And without hesitation, they said, all the time. And it was
so sweet.
It was a very powerful, very sweet message.
President, Mrs. Bush, caring for the least of these is obviously something that's very important in your family. I mean, not only are the two of you very involved, but your daughters have been involved, and both have spent extended time volunteering, caring for people with HIV. So obviously you did something right with them. And how did you teach your daughters to this life of self-sacrifice?
Well, I think we both were very fortunate to have parents who modeled that behavior for us through our whole childhood, and I think we've done that with Barbara and Jenna as well. But one of the really, really interesting things and sweet parts of the work the President has done with PEPFAR and PMI is that our girls have been so engaged in it. Barbara worked for 9 months in a hospital in South Africa, a children's hospital in South Africa. Jenna worked with UNICEF in Central America and South America, and then came home and wrote a book about a girl that she met there who is an AIDS orphan, who had a baby, became pregnant as a single young girl, 17-year-old, and was able to deliver an HIV-free baby. And one of the sweet things that happened when Jenna and I were together, I think we were in Zambia, but I may be wrong, and two young women were telling us their stories, and everyone around was really surprised that they told us this story in front of other people because it was really a secret. But both of them had contracted AIDS because of sexual abuse. And so Jenna went over after. They wept while they told the stories, and so, of course, we did too. But after it was finished, Jenna went over just to speak to them by herself, and she said, you know, this happens to girls all over the world. It's not just you. And she said, I wrote a book about a girl I met in Central America that has your same story. And they said, oh, would you write a book about us?
You know, I think, first of all, there's nothing that makes a parent more proud when their child becomes a contributor. I suspect that if people got to see what our girls got to see, they would want to help save lives too. And so one of the real challenges is to make sure that America's conscience is raised, that people understand the plight of their fellow citizen. And your church has done a great job of this. Others need to be involved as well. And there's a lot of groups that are looking for a way to fulfill, you know, a calling. And
when
it's helpful to challenge their compassion.
When you become private citizens again in January, how are you going to continue this work? How will that change?
Well, we're going to build a policy center / Freedom Institute at Southern Methodist University, where Laura went to college. And the whole purpose of this institute is to promote freedom at home and freedom abroad based upon universal principles. And so even though I haven't had much time to think about it, since I've been interested in the free market system, by taking non-free market action to save the free market system. But when we get out of here, we'll be to, you know, this whole discussion we've had here is will be a part of the Institute. And I just can envision, you know, programs coming out of this place that'll encourage young people to go to volunteer their time, or to encourage, you know, one interesting initiative that you ought to think about, and I ought to think about, is to say to baby boomers, you know, retirement isn't a golf course. Fulfilling retirement is to, you know, use your time and talent. Huh?
That's not retirement, that's hell.
That's right, yeah.
The golf course every day?
Oh,
sorry.
No, exactly. Particularly if you're a lousy golfer.
Which we are.
You must be.
We are. Do you see any intersection? You also have a passion for literacy. Do you see an intersection between your passion for literacy and for HIV/AIDS and this institute that you're...
Sure, and one of the other great initiatives that the President has started is the Africa Education Initiative. And we've supported countries to design their own textbooks, and they worked with mainly minority-serving universities in the U.S. to write and textbooks for K through 8. But a lot of those, and especially for adult illiteracy programs where adults are learning to read, a lot of those early primers, those reading primers, are based on health education. And so were a lot of these textbooks that the AEI program helped each country develop. Because if children know that you get malaria from a mosquito, they can go home and tell their parents. And if they know, if they just learned in their little reader how to use a mosquito net or whatever, they can also educate their parents. And so there's a real combination between health and literacy.
And there's a real combination between freedom and literacy.
That's right.
Literacy is freedom. If you're a literate person, you become a better citizen, and you ask tough questions for governments that may not listen to the needs of the citizens. Illiteracy locks people into a status quo that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so absolutely there's a big connection between literacy and what Laura described, and literacy and just the whole notion of freeing people to be able to realize their dreams.
I had one last question, and then you probably had one as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's we've been talking a lot about PEPFAR, and that's people in other parts of our world, but But we're here in the United States today on World AIDS Day, and there are people in this audience who are HIV positive.
Yeah.
And what message do you, the two of you or as individuals, what do you want to say to the people in this audience who are positive?
That PEPFAR is a part of a comprehensive strategy to deal both with AIDS both at home and abroad, and that the intention of PEPFAR was never to pirate money away from a domestic program. The intention for PEPFAR is to build on what we've learned here at home. And so the first question that people ought to ask is, what's the funding been like? In other words, funding equals commitment. Sometimes it equals, effective programming, but at least the funding levels will give you a sense of how committed the country is. And as I mentioned, we spend about $99 billion at home, which is a 40% increase from 2001 to today, which is positive. It turns out that, and in my State of the Union, by the way, I talked, I think a couple of times about, HIV in neighborhoods that weren't used to HIV, inner city America, for example. And this is a issue that's going to require constant vigilance here at home, and that people that may think that they're safe, have got to be reminded that care and education is important. So, people in America should not think that PEPFAR means that we don't care about them.
Yeah,
because we do. This nation is dedicated to, helping people whose lives have been severely affected by HIV/AIDS.
I tried to introduce Dr. Mark Dybel, our Global AIDS Coordinator, earlier, but he was with you coming in. But I see he's sitting here next to Barbara. So, Mark, would you stand up and let us recognize the guy who's done all the work? Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Mark doesn't like you to do that to him. He would rather be anonymous. Wouldn't you, Mark? Yeah.
Well, and I know you don't like us to do this to you, but in the pre-show, before we went on the air with a number of the networks, I had written to or called up 8 different world leaders, and I asked them what they'd like to say about PEPFAR, and every one of them wanted to give a video tribute, and we showed those in the pre-session, and I wanted to read you the list of former President Clinton, President-elect Obama, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Prime Minister Tony Blair, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, representing all of the African presidents, saying thank you to you. All of the PEPFAR countries wanted to say thanks. Bill and Melinda Gates, Director Michael Kazakhstan, and a friend I met out on the street named Bono. We've played 7 of these video tributes to you in our preliminary program, but I wanted you to hear just a short, kind of about a minute, a synopsis of some of these. And so let's watch this for just a second.
And on this World AIDS Day, it's a particular pleasure for me to be able to add my congratulations to my friend President Bush on the award of the International Medal of Peace for his work to promote global health. Through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, the Malaria Initiative, and the global funds provided by his administration, African countries in particular have been able to increase their health assets and take a major step forward in delivery of health services. President Bush's efforts have saved, literally, millions of lives. But many of those who benefited will never be able to say thank you face to face. So it is on their behalf today that we say, for your leadership, your determination, your insight, and your investment, thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, your dedication to global health has been key to our success, and we thank you very much. You have set very high standards that we hope others shall follow. We wish you the best in your future endeavors and hope to see you again soon in Rwanda.
I congratulate President Bush on his legacy of leadership in this fight. The President's emergency plan for AIDS relief has made it possible for people in countries hardest hit by the disease to receive treatment.
Mr. President, thank you for being a champion for global health and for creating a legacy of hope that will last for many years to come.
I want to thank President Bush for his leadership. He is a hero. You are a hero, sir, in the fight against this deadly disease. I'd like to toast your missus, the First Lady, Laura. I'd like to toast Rick Warren for his leadership. So many of you in the room I've kind of gotten to know over the years, and I'm in awe of what you've all accomplished.
I would like to congratulate President Bush for winning the International Medal for Peace for his efforts in global health. The Global Fund is one of the instruments President Bush and the U.S. Congress, through their generous funding, have used in this effort. And as a result, millions of lives have been saved.
So much more to do, I know, but it's a day to stop and give thanks. God bless America.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stand up. You know, we're going to move over here for just a minute. We've talked earlier about how all of these problems are connected. Literacy, poverty, disease, education. And that's what the peace plan is all about. Peace stands for promote reconciliation, equip leaders, assist the poor, care for the sick, and educate the next generation. And this year, the Peace Coalition of churches, over 400,000 churches in 162 countries, and businesses and individuals, part of the Peace Coalition, decided that we wanted to begin a tradition of presenting an award called the International Medal of Peace for the most outstanding contribution in attacking what we call the 5 global Goliaths: spiritual emptiness, corruption, extreme poverty, pandemic diseases, and illiteracy. And the consensus was unanimous that the first International Medal of Peace would be presented to President George Bush on the 20th anniversary of World AIDS Day. And it is with great honor and great humility and respect that we give you this award on the behalf of all of those in the Peace Coalition representing 162 countries. And we thank you, sir, for your commitment.
Thank you so much. I'm going to drop the medal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
God
much.
bless you.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Good job.
Thank you so much.
You can be seated. A lot has been done, but a lot still needs to be done. And I have talked several times privately with President-elect Obama. And I asked him to bring a greeting to you and about his commitment to dealing with AIDS, both here in America and around the world, and his commitment to continue PEPFAR. In fact, many of you who watched the Saddleback Civil Forum in August when I interviewed President-elect Obama and John McCain for an hour each, that he publicly stated that he was supporting PEPFAR, would renew his commitment and his dedication to being a part of this. And I asked him to bring a greeting about where we need to go in the future. And so I want you to watch this from President-elect Obama.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to send my greetings and to share a few words with you on this special day. It's my privilege to thank Pastor Rick, Kay, and all of you for your leadership in the struggle against HIV/AIDS and your steadfast commitment to eradicating this disease. On this 20th anniversary of World AIDS Day, I think it's appropriate to look back for a moment to when this day was first observed. In 1988, when ministers of health from around the world first had the notion to set aside a day to highlight the threat of HIV/AIDS, they faced widespread ignorance and fear. Back then, many refused to even acknowledge the existence of this disease, let alone the devastating impact it was having on families and communities around the world. Today, because of the work of people like you, women in Kenya who were widowed by the disease and once shunned by society have banded together to support and empower each other. Scientists around the world are discovering and engineering new medicines to give people with HIV/AIDS another chance at life. NGOs and faith-based institutions are marshaling the best of the human spirit to help those affected. And world governments are coming together to address the humanitarian crisis the pandemic has left in its wake. I salute President Bush for his leadership in crafting a plan for AIDS relief in Africa and backing it up with funding dedicated to saving lives and preventing the spread of the disease. And my administration will continue this critical work to address the crisis around the world. But we must also recommit ourselves to addressing the AIDS crisis here in the United States with a strong national strategy of education, prevention, and treatment, focusing on those communities at greatest risk. This strategy must be based on the best available science and built on the foundation of a strong healthcare system. But in the end, this epidemic can't be stopped by government alone, and money alone is not the answer either. All of us must do our part. This year's slogan, "Stop AIDS, Keep the Promise," is a timely one. In the Apostle Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he asked, "If the trumpet does not sound a clear call, who will get ready for battle?" We as leaders must continue to sound that call and encourage others to see themselves as leaders in this fight. And we must reaffirm our own commitment to confront and defeat this disease once and for all. Thank you for your extraordinary work that each of you do every day. I am humbled by your devotion to this cause and look forward to working with you and new partners in this effort in the years ahead. God bless you all.
Many years ago, the very famous Catholic bishop, Fulton Sheen, was visiting a leprosy colony in Africa. And he walked in to see the people who were there, and many of them were barely hanging on, had lost limbs, had lost parts of their bodies. And he walked over to one man who was sitting on the ground with just a loincloth on. And this man not only had leprosy, but he had several other skin diseases that were oozing, just open sores all over his body and pus. And when he looked at this man, he leaned over to talk to this man, and he was wearing a cross, a crucifix. And the chain broke, and the cross fell into an open sore on that man's leg. And Fulton Sheen said, you know, when I first saw that, he said, I was revolted. He said, it just disgusted me. And he said, I really kind of stepped back in shock. And then he said, you know, all of a sudden, I was overwhelmed with love for this man. And he said, I reached into the sore, and I took up the cross. And that's what we're trying to do at Saddleback Church. We're trying to go out into the sores of life where people are bleeding and dying and hurting, and where they are lonely. No one should ever have to die alone. And we want to go out into the sores of life and take up the cross. You know, Jesus Christ said, as much as you've done to me, to others, you did it to me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you healed me. I was in prison and you visited me. I was without food and you gave me food. A lot has been done, but there's a lot more to be done. And my challenge to you as we conclude this Saddleback Civil Forum on World AIDS Day is to ask you, what are you going to do? Will I walk out of here, or those who are watching on the broadcast across America, will I walk out of here saying, well, that was nice, and that's good, and I'm glad our country's doing it? Or will you say, I'm in? I'm in. Because it's not just a matter of a nice thing to do. It's a matter of life or death. It's a matter of the fact that when people are out hurting and we do nothing, our love vanishes. And it's all about that. I want to thank you for coming to this civil forum. And I want to bring back the African Children's Choir to sing one more song as we close. So let's bring them back.